What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Sunbelt Syndicate, a special edition as we get closer and closer to March Madness. Actually, I guess, Trevor, we've already really started into March Madness, but it's going to pick up here. And I do want to say before we get going, along the way, we are brought to you by collegefootballdogs.com. A lot of movement going on the NFL side of things. We are publishing both college football and pro football articles. It seems like more than one an hour. So definitely check out the website. That's also part of Dog TV, what will soon to become a podcast network on the website that's running almost continuously. So you can always jump over there and find some coverage. Also brought to you by Dubby Energy Powder. Down below, SB Syndicate at checkout for a little affiliated link and get a little percentage off. Let them know that we sent you over there. I've got my sour gummy bear flavor. Is it gummy bear or gummy worm? I think it's gummy bear. Anyway, it's fantastic. It's like $1 a drink when you break it down. So if you need a little pick-me-up, it's not a bad thing to use to give you a little boost in the end of the day. Very clean energy, not a bunch of sugar, no dyes, all that good stuff. And for the second time this season, I wanted to have more guests. But people are really busy and they're experts, so I want to have them on when it comes to basketball. We have the host of the Two Pointers podcast, Trevor Everette, joining us to talk some Sunbelt hoop action. Welcome to the show, Trevor. Thanks for coming on and hanging out with us tonight.
First of all, thank you for having me. Look, talking about March is already here. I was at the CAA Championship this weekend, and in a span of this is one day, in the span of, I guess if you take the Charleston blowout out of it, in a span of 6 hours, I saw one of the best teams get upset. I saw a 60-foot buzzer beater, and I saw a double to overtime game that saw a 7-seed win. That was just a conference tournament quarterfinal, by the way. March is here, and obviously we've already punched some tickets, and I'm really excited to talk, and I appreciate having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. If you guys don't follow him already, because I've mentioned him a few times on this show specifically, and he actually had me on his show to talk some Sunbelt hoops before the season got rolling this year. So hopefully I'd sent some of you guys over there to check him out. He does both college and pro hoops as well. So definitely check him out. A great listen. He's got pretty good audio equipment, so he sounds very good on his show as well, as you'll hear here tonight. He's got a good voice for this. So I'm definitely happy to have him on. And again, provide a little bit more expertise than you usually hear from me on the basketball side of things as we get rolling along here. So why are we here? We know that the Sunbelt tournament has concluded. We don't know who the Sunbelt representative will go up against, but that is what we're here to talk about and speculate with tonight. That's kind of why we scheduled the show for now, because we thought there'd be a whole lot more interesting things to talk about. You got one team going up against one team, right? You're going to go against just a bunch of statistics. But now we know we can speculate on how they're going to match up, where they're going to be sent, what seed they may end up being. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start jumping into that. We're going to call this one the Dukes Dancing, or the Dukes Are Dancing, however you want to do that. If you feel that is grammatically incorrect, I apologize. But we will quickly move on from that slide in the first place. So overall, with the standings on what they finished with this season in the Sun Belt, and I guess before we get going, Trevor, I know you didn't get to watch a ton of Sun Belt basketball this year as you cover another league and just a big net of, no pun intended, big net of other coverage that you're doing in general. But I do know that you headed up the mountain to see the App State versus Auburn game. So maybe talk about your experience in the Sun Belt literally this season and what that was kind of like for you up there.
Could have been two games. I shot you a text the other day, a little anniversary trip. I tried to convince my wife to go down. We were not far from Conway for two of these teams. Coastal was hosting what eventually ended up being the team that we're going to spend majority of today talking about, which obviously stinks, but, anniversary weekend, had a great time. So I know she was willing enough to get, and obviously I wouldn't have gotten the App State opportunity without you putting some stuff out on some forums. Y'all got a really tight-knit community up there in Boone. Shout out to, I can't think of his name right now. Oh my gosh. I'll come up with it. But no, well, look, even at the CAA Championship, shout out to Mid-Major Madness, man. I'm sitting next to him and, two computers in front of him. I've got a computer in front of me, and between breaks, we had like 3 screens up. We're watching every championship game we can because there's like bids getting punched left and right. And so I was keeping up, even though at that point at JMU had gotten up so much, I kind of was like, all right, what's the other one that's on we can watch instead? Because I kind of knew this was coming anyway. We had talked about this for weeks. Specifically on the app thing, like app was my pick all year, and I've really just like, even from the beginning, I didn't cover the Sun Belt this year in the ECB podcast magazine. Would have loved to, obviously, with two of the best teams in mid-major college basketball, and obviously a JMU's case we'll get to in a little bit. One of the best teams in the country, if we're being real with each other. And at the end of the day, like, look, App State, I've never been to any game at App State before. I would love to have football have been first. But look, for Coach Kearns to get a win against Auburn, I respect Bruce Pearl for even scheduling that game. That's not something that really happens a lot. Scheduling is kind of a problem anyway at the mid-major level, even if you are App State, even if you are James Madison. There's a whole article that you can read from John Fanta about James Madison and their scheduling problems. One of the best reads of the year. Of any type. John did an incredible job on that and talked about their scheduling problems this year. And look how it turned out. They're 31-3, and we're sitting here talking about who they're going to play in March Madness potentially as a 12 seed. So long-winded answer, but I think that App State was an incredible environment. And again, credit to Bruce Pearl. I think that team. I think that was a little early. It was in early December. I believe it was December 2nd or December 3rd when I was out there in Nashville, and I drove actually kind of sort of out of the way to get to Boone, but yeah, it worked. At the end of the day, like that, Court Storm, great for the students, great for the program. Coach Kearns, I mean, that's a win that he'll have on his resume when he's getting paid at the Power 6 level very soon.
Yeah. Court Storm before they became dangerous and talked about banning them.
Look, I've been in enough heat about the Court Storm thing this year. I had to go out and publicly defend myself on that a couple times. There was a tweet that I don't really regret, but it definitely didn't proceed very well. And long story short, I'm pro Court Storm, and I think we can figure out a way.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm pro Court Storm. They even did it when App State beat JMU for the first time when I was at that one. I'm not sure if that one was really appropriate when you're above somebody in the standings in your own conference and they're not ranked. But regardless, it was the fun thing. And apparently, and I think we both talked about this after your experience in Boone, App allows people on the court, like within 5 minutes of the game, anybody can just come down and get on the court, which is, I would assume, is unusual.
I had no idea. The only when you told me that, like, I genuinely couldn't believe it, and I tried to come up with, okay, are there any schools that I know of that I've been to this year? 40 games this year, 36 college, 4 high school, in tournament style. And were there any of them that even remotely did anything close? And the only thing I could think of was after wins, Campbell, my local team here in the CAA, they do like the coaching staff and the players go into the stands and like shake hands with the donors and say thank you and stuff like that. Obviously, Gore Arena is a lot smaller than Holmes, right? I think Holmes is y'all's arena, right? Holmes Center, Holmes Convocation, something like that.
Yes.
I knew it was in the right realm, but it's crazy to me. Now, whether we defend who should have, like you said, at the JMU game you were at, maybe, I don't know. All 3 of the Court Storms I saw this year were completely defensible from I defend the little guy, which is why I'm glad for you to have me. Thank you. Again, like, I defend the little guy more than anybody, I feel like, just because I think they deserve it. Campbell beat UNCW, App State beat Auburn, and then UNCW beat Charleston, right? I mean, that's a rivalry game. They've lost 8 of the last 10 in that rivalry. So wow. UNCW getting that win, students were jumping over benches. Don't defend that, but I defend the fact that it was worth it. Those students were there since like 9 a.m. I got there like 2.5 hours before the game, and they were already outside, and it was like a DJ was out there. I mean, the whole 9 yards. I defend all 3 of those that happened. Obviously, it's circumstantial. So, but yeah, the court thing's crazy. Again, long-winded answer, but the court thing is. I cannot believe people can just go and take a picture on the floor. Like, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Before we get too far along, Artie, our resident Texas State fan, Trevor, is joining us. He jumps on like almost all the time. Yeah,
interesting.
So,
week.
What's going on, Artie? Thanks for jumping on. And yeah, he's probably going to look at this. We'll take a quick look at this because most people at this point know kind of how it shook out in the end with App State taking the regular season championship, JMU falling just behind them, obviously dropping the 2 games head to head. Troy, who started off very hot in conference play up towards the top themselves with a battle with JMU before App State really got it together and started jumping up there as well. Arkansas State goes on a run towards the end. They get that 4 seed and obviously worked out pretty well for them. We'll go into the bracket look here in a second. A disappointing season for Southern Miss. However, they had a lot of injuries before the season even really got going. Trevor is well aware of one of the guys for Southern Miss who unfortunately couldn't really stay on the floor long enough. I'm going Curbelo.
Yeah.
Curbelo. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there with Southern Miss, but a little bit of a surprise after taking the regular season championship home last season and being a favorite coming into this year. South Alabama, who was in the championship game against Louisiana last year, who I guess I skipped over Louisiana. They looked like they were going to be a top 4 seed, probably towards 3/4 mark towards the end of the season, and then fell apart there at the end, but did end up going into 5th place before they got into the tournament. South Alabama, again, those two teams matched up in the championship game from last year. Both teams lost quite a few players going into this season. We knew it wasn't going to probably be the same for either team, and they end up towards the middle, which probably isn't a big shock, but I think both those programs are probably disappointed. I think the rest of the league is somewhat where you would have expected them. Texas State, as we see here, ended not so great, but ended the regular season not so amazingly, but they put themselves in a decent enough position to make a little run here in the bracket, as we'll see here in the next one. And just to touch on some of the other teams, Old Dominion, Trevor, doesn't look so great now. I had them as my sleeper pick to start the year. We were actually live on your show when they were taking it to, oh gosh, you're going to have to remind me who they were going up against, that they were.
I think it was out in Hawaii or something. I don't remember. Or it was early in the year. I know who you're talking about. I can pull up their schedule quickly, but
it was like an SEC opponent that they went on the road and were battling.
That's right. I was thinking of the Hawaii tournament that they played really well in when Jones had the heart attack. I thought that was
unfortunate for him. Yeah.
Too. Hey, look, I'm just glad to see he's healthy. I'm glad to see that he's going to actually enjoy retirement, because there are coaches that take it too far and then don't and then they just have 2 years left on their life, and it's just scary.
Yeah.
Old Dominion, by the way, beat Drexel, who was the 2 seed in the CAA. Let me just put that out there. That's quite the, when the season's over, we settle the dust and we go, interesting result there. But early on, Drexel had to figure some things out. Coach Spiker, I think, is really good. They were playing Arkansas at Arkansas.
Ah, yes.
That aged decently well. Arkansas figured some stuff out, and I think they're a sleeper in the SEC potentially.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, at the time when we were doing the live show, they were hanging right with them. It was early in the season. We thought, okay, yeah, they're playing down there an SEC opponent, and they're just hanging right there. And I told you that was my sleeper pick, as they had every game that they lost last year was close, even if they lost. And I felt like it's one of those things, you just get a couple different plays, a player or two, and you got a big difference that could go into the net positive. Unfortunately, they had a lot of different things go wrong for them. Obviously, we talked about the health of their head coach, who has now been. It's kind of. The situation, obviously, with the coaching wasn't funny, but it's funny that they go from a guy whose last name is Jones to another guy with the last name Jones, Mike Jones. And the Monarchists were having a lot of fun with that. If you've listened to their podcast at all as Sunbelt fans, and, the rapper who can repeatedly say his name, my name is Mike Jones, and says it all over his tracks. Anyway, they put a funny gif out. It was comical. But, hopefully they get into a better situation, because they also had to kick one of their best, actually the best player and the top scorer in the league at the time, literally got kicked off the team about mid-season, I think it was. So unfortunate there. And hey, before we move on, since we've got them up on the screen, Coastal Carolina just one spot above ODU in the standings. Is it official yet that they've hired Western Carolina's coach at this point, or that's still just
speculation? It 100% is. I had heard something that morning that he may be on the move from Western. Didn't really look. I believe it till I see it, even with the coaching carousel now and how much information is out there. But I knew he was probably getting a job, and I'm really glad you brought it up, because I had 2 things I wanted to say about these 2 teams specifically, which for Sunbelt fans, they're going to enjoy this, but for fans that maybe just be tuning in on this, oh, cool, Sunbelt show, talking about JMU. And they're we're 18 minutes in. Why are they talking about the 2 worst teams in the league this year? It's because I think it just shows you where we are, even in March. I was sitting, talking to guys at the CAA championship, and just the amount of players that are already in the portal that were in front of me the entire weekend. It's just crazy to think. So there's just a lot of stuff going on. Yes, Justin Gray is one of the best coaches in the country at the level, and I think that's an incredible hire. He's really well connected in this area. Obviously, went to Wake Forest, had a great career there as a player. That's a hire that I think if Coastal fans who might just be, more football forward, which I think is probably a lot of them, especially with basketball this year. I hope to get down there in November for the Myrtle Beach Invitational, incredible tournament that I've never had a chance to go to. But, awesome venue that gets to host that every single year. But, Justin Gray is one of the best coaches at the level. I'm super excited. What he's done in 4 years there at Western, even without Von Terry's will right when you have a player like that who's one of the best players in the country. Let me just be upfront about that, right? 22 6-6 or something stupid like that. Right? He had an incredible season. Look, it's not a, hey, we're going to win 16 games next year move. I just want to be completely clear about that. And then Old Dominion, I was actually really surprised by. There was a bunch of Jones that were floated out there. I think they got the wrong one. I'm really surprised they didn't try to go after Robert Jones at Norfolk State, who just continues to absolutely tear up the MEAC and just wins. Like, even when Central has really good years in the MEAC, or Howard was the tournament team last year for the MEAC, Robert Jones is an incredible coach, and he knows the area really well, probably almost better than anybody in the country. And I'm really surprised that you don't go after that Jones of all Joneses. I was really surprised by that. Not that the Mike Jones that they got wasn't connected, but Robert Jones is the most connected person in the Norfolk area. I mean, it's not even close. And I was just surprised by that.
Yeah, no, I remember you saying that first and foremost, like before any of the news even really started coming out. You're throwing it out. And Artie, I'm not sure if Artie's in on the joke on that, but do you know any real background about Mike Jones, like where he's come from to come into ODU like that? Or
I'd be lying. I don't. Yeah, I'd be lying if I was like, I've heard, like, or this is what I like is from his background. I mean, I can look it up and probably give you an answer. Like, when you Google Mike Jones, the rapper comes up, like, first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but, you know, I don't want to force anything, but at the end of the day, I knew how I felt about Robert Jones, and so I was like, I'm not going to say anything about a guy I don't know a lot about. But if it's the Mike Jones I think it is, because there was two Mike Jones that were in on this. It was between two different Mike Jones, which is really crazy. And I'd be lying if I told you, like, it should have been this one or that one. I don't know. It's just cool to think Jeff Capel was also an ODU coach there, also another African American coach. But look, he was an alumni of the Monarchs from 91 to 95, and I think that's probably ultimately what was his helping thing. 2 tournament championship teams, it looks like, greatest wins, some of the greatest wins, and then he was an assistant at Maryland. So that's the Mike Jones we're talking about here. So yeah, that's probably I think it's, look, anybody that comes through Willard's system in Maryland. Look, I think that's probably a good guy to have around. But again, I can't make it clear enough that they should have went after Norfolk State's Robert Jones, and they might have. I'm not saying that. I'm not connected enough to tell you they didn't, but I can't tell you. There's no one better in that area.
Yeah, so that makes perfect sense. And I, when you said that, I was like, wow, that is a good, because I remember them matching up with App State in a play-in game, the COVID year, whatever, 2020, I guess it was, or 21 by the time the dance started. I can't even remember at this point. But anyway, Norfolk State beat App State in that first game to get to play the great chance and privilege to play Gonzaga in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. So that didn't go so well for them. But I do remember that one specifically. So let's take a quick look at the bracket itself and how it ended up working out. As noted, Texas State, one of the 4 worst teams throughout the regular season, although, come to note, again, towards the end of the season, they took down both App State and Troy. And then they also took down Troy again here in the bracket to get into the semifinals. So, pretty decent run there at the end. Texas State has routinely been one of the better teams in the conference. So before the season, had you told me Texas State would end up here, I wouldn't have been ultimately all that surprised or shocked. With where they started this bracket, I would have told you that I would have been surprised. It wasn't a surprise to see them beat James Madison at the start, ODU to start with. But that was a close game. And then they go in and they beat Southern Miss pretty easily. Then they go in and they beat Troy, and then they hang with James Madison better than Arkansas State did in the championship game. So Texas State may be positioned very well going into next season. And as Artie has been watching the show tonight, hopefully he's got some high hopes for where basketball can get to there. As far as disappointing years go, again, Marshall didn't have the greatest year, but still goes in and upset. It's not a huge upset. It's only 1 seed difference, but they do go in there and beat Georgia State in their first round before they getting bounced by James Madison ultimately in that next one. Again, towards the top, you've got kind of the expected layout with App State and Arkansas State moving on there at the top and then matching up. And what a finish in that one. Probably the best finish of the tournament, except maybe, I don't know, because of how weird it was, the Texas State ODU finish that wasn't. I don't know how much of that one you saw, Trevor, but unfortunately, for some reason, the Sun Belt doesn't seem to emphasize the fact that broadcasters need to be on site for their games. So these guys are doing it from a satellite location in the New Orleans Superdome. And they do a good job, I think. I mean, as far as the guys who are actually putting on the broadcast, I don't think they're bad or poor at all. I don't like the decision not to have them there live, because what happened is the clock was off by like 3 seconds, or it was more than just a split second. ODU had hit a shot, which seems like clearly before the clock had gone. It looked like he shot it way early, actually. Looked like he shot it with 2 seconds left in the game. He banks it in. They go nuts. They think they've won the game. And then they show the replay, and the clock clearly runs out before it ever leaves his hand. It wasn't even really all that close. It was pretty clear, cut and dry. But everybody watching the broadcast on ESPN Plus had thought that it was a legit shot that got ODU the win. So anyway, I say all that to say, hopefully the Sun Belt learns from this. I know they got a lot of crap for running it the way they did. So hopefully they change that going forward. I don't really think New Orleans and Pensacola are all that far apart. I would think it's probably a decent drive, but you could probably drive it, and if you didn't want to fly. So hopefully they change that moving forward. But
was there ever an answer why they were remote? Like I know what you're talking about now that you described it there at the end with the amount of time. Because at first I was like, yeah, maybe I missed this one because stuff going on. I think on the 5th, the 5th. God, y'all's tournament is forever long. 5th, 7th, 9th, 10th, 11th. Once the 9th, 10th, 11th starts, I mean, it's just you wake up every day and it's like, oh, cool, we're almost to the end. But that March 5th, like that's crazy. I didn't realize it was 2 days ahead. No, I did. I just don't understand that. Like, I can't imagine for the life of me the Sun Belt and the CAA this year. The Sun Belt ranked higher in KenPom and conference rating by a couple spots over the CAA, and the CAA is one of the best conferences in the country at this level. And I'm just using that as a barometer, right? Like, I know what I watch, I know what I think, but it's crazy to think that they like. I know there's a lot that goes into this, but why? Like, I just can't for the life of me understand why somebody was remote for that. I don't get it.
I don't either, and we even got Artie questioning why Pensacola, Florida. The only reason that I see Pensacola making sense to me is because it's kind of a destination. It doesn't really make
100%.
sense as far as where these teams are located, but it's kind of around spring break. It's obviously a beach, it's kind of a name brand, I guess, when you think about places to go in Florida. So,
it's in the South. Let me just make that abundantly clear to people that might be like, but why? Like, like people like say, why DC? Why is DC the hotbed for 3 conference tournaments? I think the CAA is this year, ACC is this year, and then there's another conference that gets the DC area next year. And it's like you just have to think about the logistical nightmare of like they couldn't even get 2 broadcasters to Pensacola for crying out loud. Like Jeez. These conference, I don't think people underestimate like how much of a nightmare. I like any venue that can support it. I don't know what in Naval Air Base they're talking about, but he's talking about. But I'm sure there's somewhere. The point is even the Sun Belt or even the whatever you think is the worst conference in college basketball that does a neutral site, right? I'm a fan of a neutral site. I don't love the ASUN, the NEC type of format where the home team gets the bit. Like I don't love it. I understand it. It ended up not mattering because all those 1 seeds didn't even win. I don't think I can't remember what happened in the NEC exactly, but it's not what we're here to talk about. The point is, I just got back from a neutral conference site, and it's the best. They just can never. If they can figure out the ticketing and stop making it so expensive, like the cheapest ticket for this quarterfinal get in was like $75 for the CAA.
Wow,
which is stupid. Like I don't know if that was 1 session or 4, but still, if I'm a Charleston fan, I'm watching Charleston at noon and I'm getting the heck out of there. But for $75, maybe they're keeping people around. Maybe that's what they think they're doing. I promise you, the only teams that were there that even made a bit of a crowd was Towson and UNCW. Everything else, like, it just wasn't the same. So the whole point being the Pensacola thing, like, there's not really another venue that they could have because it can't be the Superdome. Like, it can't be the New Orleans Superdome where they have the guys broadcasting, right? But it also can't be, John Smith High School. Like, it has to be somewhere, and this arena is perfect size for it. I think it's an incredible venue from everything I see, but I just don't know if there's a better answer in the Southeast.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, you would think that you've got Georgia State in Atlanta. Obviously, like you said, you don't really want to have them host it, but you've got to think there's a number of arenas in that area that maybe are smaller venues that could. But you're right. I mean, there's not the Deep South. I mean, I guess you maybe do it in New Orleans and host it where the Pelicans play. I don't really.
I don't hate that at all. I really don't. But then you have the same problem as you have a 17,000 seat arena. That how many people do we know for a fact? I mean, we could probably pull it up if it would take me a minute. But like, how many people showed up to the championship game for crying out loud?
Oh, the eye test was not great. To be honest with you,
imagine the Pelicans arena.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Anyway, sorry,
Yeah,
I know
it's
I got you on a tangent there. That was my fault.
no, it's true though. I mean, it's cost prohibitive for a conference such as the Sun Belt, which is almost always and traditionally has been a one bid league. And even with as good as these top two teams are this year, it doesn't look like we're going to get two bids until that can become more of a usual thing. I don't think there's any reason, like you said, to go get an arena that seats almost 19,000 people and not fill up even a quarter of it. I mean, that's just kind of silly when you look at it that way. So it definitely makes sense to follow up. Obviously, James Madison goes on the run. Again, a little bit of a struggle against a tough Texas State team who woke up there towards the end, but they win rather easily. I think probably the first, 12 or 13 minutes were pretty close in the championship matchup with Arkansas State and JMU, and then they just kind of turned it on, and it was actually eerily similar to how the vast majority of the Arkansas State and App State game had gone, which is Arkansas State kind of jumped out a little bit early, and then it just kind of stayed within that 4, 5, 6, 7 point difference. And like as soon as somebody would score, the other team would score. So it never really got all that close till the end. Obviously, App State kind of closes that gap right there with 4 or 5 minutes left, and has a chance to win it multiple times, and as does Arkansas State. And then obviously they do pull it off with that very last second shot. But then JMU just wins by 20 points in 91-71 final in that championship game. So unquestioned win by the Dukes from JMU. They are going dancing for the first time since 2013, I think it is. Yes, 2013. So congrats to the Dukes as we move on to see some of their resume, or we find out, obviously Sunday, find out where they're seated. But we're going to talk about where they're possibly seated, obviously, tonight, and who they possibly could match up with before we get into that. And Trevor, did you find us any information you wanted to share on that?
On the attendance?
Yeah.
I found something else that you said that you said multiple times tonight that I think we'll get to later about the bids, about the multi-bids that I found fascinating just now by accident. So we'll get to it, I'm sure. Good.
Yeah, save that, and we will start with JMU's resume. 31-3 overall, 15-3 within the conference. Obviously, those two losses, as we'll get to App State, but they have won now 13 straight games. So obviously, they hit that mark when you're talking about a hot team in March. They are certainly that. They were hot in February. They continue it into March. They had a season-opening win over then number 4 Michigan State. And Trevor, I'm going to have you chime in here real quick with the thought. I mean, tell me where you think Michigan State is. Are they one of the ones that's like kind of a shoe-in at this point? They still have some work to do, or are you up on where the Spartans are currently sitting as it looks in the Big Ten right now?
This is why I will preface this now. I had it saved for later a week ago about like the whole shaping up overall thing. I'll preface right now and tell people I'm not a bracketologist. I make that very clear. I do not have the acumen to put that together, and I will trust many people in this space, specifically Bracket Dom, Jonathan Warner, T3. Huge shout out to T3. That's my boy. Yep. I go off a bracket matrix, even though it does pull in people that are terrible at it. Like generally, it pulls in the people that have filled in the bracket properly. So when you had some questions in the rundown you sent me, I tried to just go off a bracket matrix's averages. We'll get to like the specifics of that in a second. Michigan State specifically, this is where the reason I preface with that is like my eyes tell me that they're not a great team. I think they're really ball dominant and reliant on Tyson Walker, but the problem is they're starting to shape things up. The Big Ten has enough top teams that they've beaten. If I'm correct, they are, as of right now, let me see what their seed is. They are averaging across all the brackets that have been submitted officially, or like submitted as in people that update them for the rankings. Yes. 114 total people have updated it correctly, and they're a 9.7 average.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, and again, this is good for JMU. I'm not trashing Michigan State. I'm not sure. Last year they were a 7 and they beat whoever, and I don't remember exactly how it fell out, but they were 7 last year and they beat somebody, or 8. This is not the team I think that does that.
No. Yeah, I'd agree. I think what we saw there in that first matchup helps lend to that. Again, that's not. It sounds like that's a backhanded compliment to James Madison, but. I think when you're at home as a power program and a power school specifically, and you're playing what a lot of people don't even really know probably in that area of the country where James Madison is at that point. They certainly know now. But, going into that game, they probably didn't expect it to be much of a game. Probably a 20-point win is probably what they expected. I don't know what the spread was, but I would assume it was not supposed to be close.
It was probably 15-20. I mean, the thing that, and I want to be correct on Michigan State, 7 seed last year, they beat USC in the first round, 7-8. They beat Marquette, and then they lost to Kansas State in that incredible team with Jerome Tang and Marquise Noel. So just wanted to make sure I got that clear. Look, what were we talking about? Oh my gosh, I got distracted by making sure I wasn't wrong on Michigan State. But JMU, like people knowing who JMU was, like just a quick thing there, like the football program and all the stuff that surrounded that this year. I've made it clear to you, I don't follow college football to the extent. I just try to keep up with it nationally, watch game day, the whole thing. And I mean, when you were telling me about the game day thing and going up there, I mean, like I knew what was going on because JMU was a brand, and obviously they had some bowl stuff that went into account. And obviously, I think they ended up being able to make one because of some circumstances. So good for them. And like I know who they are. Right? I'm a college basketball fan. I follow this sport at a large scale, but I would agree that probably the national public, when they go to see a 12 next to them, will spoiler. For me, at least. Sorry, I know I got ahead there. But when we see a blank number next to them that's not a 16, a 15, a 14, etc., people don't even know what conference they're probably in because they've obviously moved conferences not that long ago. So the point is people are going to look at them and see the record and be like, oh my God, pretty Cinderella pick, i.e. Charleston last year, who lost to the eventual runner-up in the national championship game. So, that number is a very, very popular pick, and I think we'll get to them again. I'm not trying to get too far ahead of myself, but the JMU recognition thing, people know who they are now. I think this will help, like you just said, and then football and some other things being successful is going to help you get your name out there, obviously. Yeah. That's not anything new.
Absolutely. Artie has another great question we'll get to right after. I want to wrap up this slide before we move on. So, again, 2 of 3 losses to first place App State. Their only bad loss and their only other loss in general was to 6th place Southern Miss, who probably at the time of that loss was playing better than they did anywhere towards the end of the season. So not even the ugliest of losses, I would say. When some outsider is looking at it and not knowing some of the things that go into it, maybe they think it's worse than it is. But I'm going to say that it's not the worst of losses, as we'll see with App State later when we talk about their chances for any postseason play. But Artie has a good question, and Trevor, I don't know how much you'll know about either of these 2 teams, but before a couple years ago, Little Rock was in the conference for both, I think, basketball and baseball as well. And UTA, I'm trying to think of UTA.
Technically, I think it's University of Texas Arlington?
Yes, that's it. There you go. Yeah. UTA. Yep. I knew it was University. I was trying to think of where the A was at. You're right. It is Arlington. They got like a Bronco or a horse of some sort, logo-wise, like orange and blue, I think, were their colors. Both of those teams actually did phenomenally when they were in the conference for basketball because guess what? They didn't have football, so they could really focus on the basketball aspect. For me, personally, I don't miss either of those 2 teams whatsoever at all. And one of the reasons is, I guess Little Rock is in Arkansas, and so you've got Arkansas State there. I never really thought of that as some massive rivalry. Maybe it was, and if anybody from either of those 2 fan bases is tuning in, they can let us know. But I never really heard a bunch of stuff about those 2 teams going at it, and so that one really didn't have anything for me. And then Little Rock matching up with anybody else was going to be like a really far game, so not much of a regional excitement. And then the exact same thing with Arlington. Maybe, you're looping in Texas State as a possibility, but again, that never seemed to have some kind of crazy heat to it. Again, not matching up with these schools and these teams in football probably leads to a little bit less of a care factor, I guess, across the board to really, feel like there's some intensity when you come into a sport that they're just starting out in for the year and everybody else has gone through like the ups and downs of football before they get to this, and they have some feelings and some thoughts they want to get out while they're playing against these teams. So personally, I don't miss them. And I'm not even sure how well either of those programs are doing at this point. But Trevor, I don't know if you, again, any thoughts at all to share on that aspect?
I've already gone off enough tangents so far, so I'll be short and sweet. Just based on what I've looked at from their historical data recently, Arkansas Little Rock went 21-12 this year. Don't know exactly how they finished in the actual conference tournament, but 21-12 is impressive. And the OVC, especially the OVC, who was just crowned with Morehead State. So let me just look it up. I'm already in here now. They were third in the OVC, and the OVC was a pretty good conference term. Morehead State was the best team, and they clinched the March Madness bid. Actually, my guys at Over Everything College Basketball were there for the second year in a row up in Evansville, nice. So that was really cool. We just had one of their players. I'm totally blanking right now on his name, and shame on me, but he was on the podcast that'll be out this week. So that was really cool. Sorry, off a tangent again. UT Arlington definitely fits the WAC better. And the reason I will say I'll be short and sweet is because neither were charter members, so it doesn't really oh no, they lost a founding member of the Sun Belt. Who really cares? It's ultimately who replaced them? You would know that more than I would off the top of my head. I would have to find it, but who ultimately replaced it? Marshall, right? You told me Marshall replaced them?
Yeah, so 4 teams came in when you lose 2, but all 4 teams brought in football, and I think that's why. So you had Southern Miss.
What were the 4? Help me out. Yep, go ahead.
Southern Miss, Marshall, ODU, and James Madison. So at this point, again,
hello, those are the 4. Yeah, I will take those 4 and at every level. Are you kidding me? Okay, so to answer his question, no, absolutely not. Do that. How did he word it? Do we miss them, or should we let them stay?
Yeah, he put miss in quotations because he was kind of alluding to the fact that Little Rock's both of those programs were towards the top almost every year in basketball when they were here. So I guess that's kind of what his thought process is. Do you miss having a better quality?
Football owns everything. Okay, let's be upfront. So no, I football owns everything, and no.
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. So we'll jump over here, talk a little bit more about where JMU ended up in the rankings. And before we do that, Artie, even as a Texas State fan, saying go JMU. It's a big accomplishment to get into the tournament. Thoughts on the NIT no longer accepting regular season champions automatically. We will save that one.
I was going to say, do you want to do that now? Because remember the thing I told you I'd save? That's it.
That's it. Yep. That's going to be fun. We're going to get to that. Trust me, we're going to get to that. Going over some stats, just to kind of throw some stuff out there for the people that are tuning in who maybe didn't watch any Sun Belt and want to know what this team's going to provide and offer coming in. So we're going over where they landed in the Sun Belt statistically in a couple different categories. Number 2 in scoring offense with 79.9 points per game. Nobody else was all that close to that mark. I guess, they're in this high 60s. But again, they were besides who was actually number 1 there? Arkansas State. Sorry. Arkansas State was number 1 with, exactly. And they didn't pull it off in that championship game, but 81.1 to 79.9 for JMU. JMU, number 2 defensively, averaging only 67.7 points allowed in their games. Number 1 in margin of victory, winning most games by a 12.2 average. Number 1 in assist to turnover ratio at 1.53. And number 2 in rebounding margin, 4.9 in that one. They're actually 13th in block shots, which when you think about defensively App State being number 1, you're thinking, oh man, 13th in block shots, not great. However, number 2 in steals. So they are still creating turnovers. And again, that's going towards that assist to turnover ratio and improving that mark there. They were 5th in 3-point field goal percentage at 35%. 2nd in opponent's 3-point field goal percentage. So defending the arc rather well at 29.3%. 8th in free throw percentage, which is a little surprising to me, less than 72%. So, impressive that they're not really hitting them from the line like that and still having that margin of victory of 12.2, closing out some close games in the end. 5th in rebounding and 2nd in rebounding margin at 4.9. We already mentioned that one, actually. That one's up on screen. And then that pretty much does it for the stats. Trevor, I don't know if you had anything that you found that you wanted to add to that before we move on to the next part of this one.
Yeah, I know this is a Sun Belt show, but this is also talking about the team that just made the tournament. So not talking about their national stats, I think because I think all the stats in Sun Belt are awesome, and it's what got them there.
Right.
But now their conference stats for what people are going to be looking at the tournament are going to be irrelevant. People are not going to look at them, and so this is perfect for. By the way, all of those do not surprise me. Like the steals thing, right? They're more active on defense. They have better guard play than they have front court play. At least I think so. I know they have a deep front court, but Terrence Edwards is everything for this team. And so I'm not surprised by the steal number. I'm also not surprised by the block number because I saw the number 1 team in that ranking and the block number. We'll get to that in a little bit. But look, at the end of the day, just a couple of things that people are going to be looking at. When you go to ESPN and you pull up, if you play any other bracket challenge, by the way, shame on you. But if you go to ESPN and you play your bracket challenge and you look at the bottom, it's going to tell you like the wins versus and loss versus and all that stuff. Obviously, the Michigan State stuff's going to be on there. The Southern Miss loss is going to be on there, like you said. But they only have 3 losses on the year, and it's crazy to think that both those other losses, like you said, regardless of who the team was, if you just look at, like, it was a top 80 KenPom loss. App State finished top 80 in the KenPom. Like, that's incredible, an incredible feat. They're 61st in KenPom. Teams similar to them in that range, just FYI, when you go to metric it out a little bit and see where they kind of, because their defense is lower than their offense, 57 offense, 76 defense. They play a really fast tempo. I say really fast. As long as you're in the top 75, I feel like you can change the style of pace that you like to play, is how I kind of look at it. They're 72nd, so they're just over that mark. Some similar teams in the range. Seton Hall, who's right now in, but if they lose to St. John's, it could get real dicey. Xavier, who's not a tournament team. Butler, who looked like one throughout the year. Virginia Tech. This is not, by the way, to say that this is where these are, because KenPom's not perfect. He's admitted that for, how many years has KenPom been out? Let me look at the page right now, because it's going to bother me. However many years it's been out. 99. So it's been out since 1999. He's not perfect. He's made that clear, right? Yeah. But the point is people are going to look at this and tell you all these stats, and I'm going to sit here and tell you that they're where they are for a reason, right? The 3 wins is going to tell you that. Things that stick out to me specifically that aren't just offensive and defensive efficiency stuff. They're 35th in the entire country. Like I said, throwing the Sunbelt stuff out for a second. 35th in the country in effective field goal percentage offense, and 23rd in the country. Talking about the defense not sounding that great when you average out KenPom's total margin. They're 35th in the country, or 23rd in the country, excuse me. So they're top 25 in the entire 362 teams where they defend the effective field goal percentage. They hold their opponents to 46.7% from the effective field goal percentage area. Ridiculous. Wow. That is that speaks more to their defense than a number next to their rating. They're 3rd in the country in 3-point defense. Talking about the steals, they don't need to generate steals; they can just generate clamping you down from deep. And then all their offensive numbers, there's only one in red, and it's free throw percentage. That could probably hurt them if we're looking at like the one thing. I think you had mentioned the Sunbelt part of it. If we're looking at one thing where that we're like, they get into a close game, they're probably in trouble. That's probably where. The thing is, though, this is March Madness, and they have 2 of the best players in the country at their position, that I'm going to take them regardless of the free throws. I'm going to take that they're going to step up to that moment, and at the end of the day, I think that's probably fine. There are some more I won't bore people with, but just the point is more is in their favor than less.
Right. Yeah. And it's weird to me on the free throw aspect. You've got Noah Friedel, who was clearly one of their best players last year. He kind of took a back seat for much of this year with the emergence of Edwards and Bickerstaff, who was a Boston College transfer who came in and made a big difference offensively and defensively throughout the year. Again, Edwards Jr., leading the way. But you've got Carey, who's been on there, Horton, who's been the thing that was actually eerily similar to between JMU and App State is that it wasn't always the same guy who was doing it. Edwards was the guy in name, but he's even had some games where he could take a backseat, and Friedel picks up the pace and takes over a game. You've got Xavier Brown, Xavion Brown, and both teams had a kid named Xavier Brown, so that was a little confusing. But the Brown for JMU was a little bit better of a shooter, so he can take over some games. But again, it's like they don't have to have that Davidson with Steph Curry. It's not like there's one clear focus. If you shut him down, you win the game. They can beat you in other forms and fashion, and that's exactly what both App State and JMU brought to the table in the Sun Belt this year, and why they were up towards up. And Troy, I want to include in that as well. Troy was like that throughout much of the season. Eugene, probably Christensen, I think, was the other one that were some of their top players. But again, it swayed depending on the game and the circumstance and who they were matching up against. So you've got a number of different teams who could throw a number of different ways of beating you, and clearly they're better at some things than others. But it's not surprising to see the top teams up there that all kind of play in that same realm of like not having to have that one guy take over the game to win it every single time. So not a shocking surprise to see JMU end up where they are. Here we go. This is the part everybody came to see. We're almost 50 minutes in. We're getting to the bracket look. I brought up a little bit of a graphic. I told Trevor like this. This is just to get some idea. We are going to talk about other numbers. We are going to talk about other opponents. but I just threw up what I saw was kind of, again, with Trevor not being a true bracketologist, but he still knows what he's talking about. I was just trying to grab from a lot of the bracketologists out there what they're speculating, who they're throwing out there, where they're throwing them out there. So let me bring up my notes real quick on that too. Trevor, if you want to say anything about where you think JMU is going to start off with at this point.
What I will say, because it won't come up again, I know for a fact because you gave me the agenda. I just want to give a huge credit to what Coach Byington. I know it's Byington.
Yeah.
What he's done. By the way, people are going to hear this and be like, he can't pronounce the name. He's giving him all this credit. I'm terrible at pronunciation, so that's just is what it is. They can find out if they listen to my show. But yeah, you said it was Byington officially, right?
Yeah, Byington, I think.
Byington. Okay, so
everyone says it so fast. You're right. It's like, I don't know. Are we butchering it? Are we getting it pretty good? Real quick, do you know where he came from before James Madison?
Georgia Southern, which is what I was about to bring up. So the reason I'm bringing it up is because I'm giving out a shout out. I'm not going to take credit for this, but Kevin Sweeney, one of the best guys out there in covering college basketball, when he took over this team through 4 years ago, they were like sub 300 in KenPom. And I just gave you every metric that was top 76.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what the transfer. I couldn't tell you right now. I've watched this team a lot this year, but I couldn't tell you right now how many years some of these guys have been on the roster. I know some of them you said were transfers. Like, I can't like pluck all that right now out of the year. I'm not a broadcaster. But the point I'm saying is, like, whether they're transfers or not, to get a team from sub 300 and then 4 years later you have them as a 31 win team and in March Madness, and every single KenPom stat that's relevant is in the top 75. You have to give it credit. And this is the worst thing I'm going to say to James Madison fans today, but he's probably gone. But I'll leave it at that.
I've heard the rumors to West Virginia.
I've heard 17 jobs. So I'm like, oh yeah, somebody's going to be like, here's the Brinks truck. Come on in. The last 4 years alone, like regardless of Southern, like the last 4 years alone is what's going to get him paid. But Georgia Southern is really good as well.
Yeah. And Georgia Southern, unfortunately, hasn't found, although, I don't know, they seem to round into form a little bit towards the end of the season.
Hey, that start, if you start that bad and you turn it around and you're at least competitive, I mean, good grief. I was texting you like halfway through the year going, are they going to win a game? Like, and it got like real for a minute there. And then obviously Mississippi Valley State and all those guys actually didn't win a game or almost didn't. So, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, that was an ugly start for them, but, a decent finish. I think I see the message boards for their fans, and most of them actually have a decent outlook towards next season. I mean, they took App State to the wire in overtime twice, and probably could have, would have, should have won those games, right? So, you're doing that to the number one team. They play James Madison close, so they're not really statistically or the eye test not as far away as they are record-wise. So the record's just ugly. Not much you can do about that. You got to take care of that business along the way. So I've got this on screen. 11 through 13 is the numbers I was seeing the most, with obviously the average there being 12. Most people, 4 out of 6 had them as a 12. Trevor, I think you said you had maybe a different number or two that you had heard or seen or thought of.
Not really. To clarify, 11.99 is their average on bracket matrix. So let's just be real. They're a 12. It is this late in the season. Now, in late January, that number is 100% going to change. But we're, as crazy as it sounds, we're 5 days away from looking at a bracket. Less than that. Yeah. It's 9 o'clock at night. So my point is I wrote down, I'll just read it verbatim. I would be shocked if they went up rather than down. I think 11 is more possible than 13. So I'm just going to carefully say that 12 is probably, not being a bracketologist, that 12 is probably where they end up. I don't think that's where they move from.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I'm not sure, I feel like there's some kind of statistical formula in the background that they help use to get them into these things too. And you're like, I don't know what that is. I don't know how.
Well, their net helps them. They're 50. I wrote it down. They're 50.
54, I think, 50, right?
54th in the net. Like, that's going to help keep them in that range versus a bubble team that is going to push them up or down. That might be in like the 9 line, the 10 line, or even like potentially some of the play in like that. What's really going to come down to is you need to be, if you're a JMU fan, you want them to be the 12 for whatever reason. I'm not making a huge case. Is you want St. John's to lose to Seton Hall. Seton Hall's already lower than getting into Dayton. You basically want to root for every power team that's a bubble team that is probably has a chance to play that to not make Dayton, basically, whether that's out completely, which is a bigger if, or to just be better like Seton Hall is. I'm just using the Big East as an example because we're literally tomorrow going to have a play-in game basically for the tournament. If the winner of St. John's Seton Hall is basically in the tournament, no questions asked. So the point is, I'm using those two as like the loser is probably in Dayton. Not that they might want to put Rick Pitino in Dayton, but whatever. It is what it is. Anyway, long-winded answer. They're 12th. Yeah. Like I think that they're going to be a 12 line. They're going to be playing a 5 seed.
That makes sense to me, especially from what like we just talked about, seeing pretty much across the board. So I've seen Washington State, Clemson matching. Okay, Washington State as a possibility out in Omaha, Clemson as a possibility in Pittsburgh. Texas Tech was listed 3 times by 3 different publications, including On3 and CBS, one in Brooklyn, one in Spokane, and one in Pittsburgh. So 3 different locations for the same matchup across 3 different publications. Kind of interesting there. But the only other one, did we cover Clemson? Did I say Clemson? Clemson in Pittsburgh. Those are the ones that I found myself. Trevor, what else have you seen, heard, or who do you think might match up better when you've looked at it?
So I'll just give you and again, I am not a bracketologist. I want to make that completely abundantly clear to everyone that's going to hear this podcast. But again, I use Bracket Matrix because it's enough data that I think the numbers end up being relatively close or accurate. The only reason I didn't have, I didn't have Texas Tech, and I'll tell you why. So I went with any team that realistically has a chance to be anywhere between a 3 and a 6 right this moment. Because ultimately, based on results, that may land them on a 5 line, right? I really think there's only 5 teams or 4 teams that they really have a chance of actually playing. But all of them that are not Duke. Duke is a 3.14 rating. Duke is not, unless they lose Thursday, they're probably not going to be a 4 seed. The Duke is a 3 probably minimum. If anything, they have a better chance to go up.
I'd say so too.
Kansas, for some reason, is still 3.25. Kansas right now, with no McCullough in the Big 12 tournament. I don't know if people didn't know that. There's the first accidental Apple thing for the YouTube audience. I accidentally put my thumbs up on the screen. For those that didn't know, the Big 12 tournament, Coach Self just announced on Jayhawk Radio the other day that Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dixon will not be playing in the Big 12 tournament. Kansas probably loses the first round game, if not the second round game. So they're a 3.25 right now, but they're probably trending closer to a 4. And if a bunch of results go against them around the teams in that similar range, they're probably a 5. Kansas is. That's crazy, as nuts as that sounds.
Yeah.
Like just Kansas being a 5. So Kansas, Kentucky, Illinois, Alabama, Auburn, BYU, South Carolina, Clemson, San Diego State, which won't happen. We don't really see mid-majors match up against each other regardless, even if the Mountain West has been the best conference of its kind this year. Leave that alone. And then Utah State.
And we don't want to see those last 2. We don't want to see those. We don't want to, like you said, we're fighting for the little guy. We don't want to see them match up in the first round.
I have a handshake bet that the Mountain West will have more Sweet 16 teams in the ACC. That's may or may not have a really large number attached to it. The guy was joking, but I don't think he realizes that the Mountain West is that good. He's just talking out of his tail. I'm not trying to go on a tangent, but the Mountain West is incredible. I've made that very clear. So let's just eliminate, for the fun of it, San Diego State and Utah State. So Clemson, you have on there Texas Tech, but the reason I did not put them on there is they're a 6.5, and they basically would have to win 1 or 2 games in the Big 12 tournament. I think they're probably trending closer to a 6 or 7 than 5 or 6. So I just left them off. Texas Tech is probably one of the worst case scenarios for JMU, because if there is a defense at that number line, it's probably Texas Tech and Grant McCaslin that can stop them. And then I'm going to eliminate Kansas for one reason, and it's because I think Kansas gets the benefit of the doubt. If they're between 5-4, I think they probably get the 4. Again, not a bracketologist. There's probably a reason why they wouldn't, but I think they'll probably end up at 4. So to answer your question, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, yeah, sorry. Just on that line. So you've got a team and a coach who's already said some of their best players are not going to go in the tournament.
The Big 12 tournament, correct? Yes, they'll play in the NCAA tournament, 100%. Yep.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But does that? You think that factors in when they try and seed these teams? Like, this team's better than what they're really. No, it doesn't factor in.
No, because they know they'll get a fully healthy roster, not actual fully healthy. Kevin McCullough is probably 80%, and then Dickinson, the shoulder, I didn't realize was that bad. So they're going to have a quote unquote fully healthy. That's a week off basically for Kansas. So, actually, it'll end up being 7 or 8 days. It actually ended up being 8 days off. So, Kentucky, Illinois, Alabama, Auburn, BYU, and South Carolina are the realistic teams. I think, like, absolutely realistic. Washington State, to answer your question, or why we didn't have them, 6.46. I don't know if their resume is strong enough that I think they'll probably land somewhere closer to 7 than 6. Same answer as earlier. But we can leave them on. But I think the one, well, I don't know if you didn't ask me this technically, so I'm not going to say it. But Kentucky, Illinois, Alabama, Auburn, BYU, and South Carolina and Clemson, I think are the most realistic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams I just said.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, like you said, Washington State is Pac-12 ain't going to be easy to win that one. I did look at their record. They are sitting at 23-8 overall. So not a shabby record, not somebody you might really want to match up with. But I guess at this point of the year, anybody you match up with is going to be scary, right? Like they all have made this tournament. You don't really want to, we've finally seen in recent years, 16-1. So, the unthinkable has happened at this point. Nobody can go in here thinking they're just going to coast through any round at this point. So yeah, it's going to be a tough road for James Madison, no matter who they match up with. But it looks like what you said, those teams there, including BYU, Alabama, Auburn, Clemson. What was the other 2 or 3 you mentioned there? One more time.
Kentucky, Illinois, Alabama. And by the way, this is in order from highest of those numbers, so 3, 4-ish to the lowest.
Gotcha.
6-ish. Kentucky, Illinois, Alabama, Auburn, BYU, South Carolina, Clemson, and then Washington State we can throw in as well.
Yeah.
Or these 2. Or these 3.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, if JMU is playing like they did for what I was, obviously it's pretty much given the majority of the season. I mean, they had 3 losses. They had the most wins in NCAA basketball right now. So, I mean, they're not going to be scared of anybody. They've also gone in and beat number 4 on the road. Again, they're not number 4 now, but they did go into somebody else's house to start the season and take out what is a monster program. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if the national media will favor them in any of those matchups, but they should take them very seriously at the very least. And I think what we've seen from James Madison leads us to believe that they could beat a number of those teams. Again, it won't be easy, but it could be possible. So,
I don't know if you had this on the docket, but I guess I'll ask you this. Who of these are you most confident they could beat? Because I have a clear, there is an answer staring at me with 4 eyes. A team that can't play a lick of defense.
Is it Clemson?
No, Clemson's defense has actually been pretty good down the stretch. But I mean, they could definitely beat Clemson. I saw Clemson beat Carolina at the Dean Dome, and I couldn't tell you if Clemson could beat another team the next week. I mean, sure.
Yeah, that's true.
But Alabama cannot defend a wet paper bag. They cannot. Now, is the winner of this game going to have 134 points? Probably. But Alabama, I think they're ridiculously overseeded. I know that they're the best offense in the country statistically, but again, they cannot guard a paper bag. So a wet paper bag. So if they get Alabama, if I'm a Duke fan, so whoever's the Dukes, you know what I mean. If they're listening to this right now and they're like, who do we draw? Whatever. If Alabama pops up on your screen at 6-ish Eastern time next week, you need to be cartwheeling in your living room. Because out of this team, you don't want to play Kentucky because they're starting to figure things. I think they're really starting to figure things out, and we've got about 5 days for me to decide whether I think they're a true national championship contender. Illinois, the offense, I think Illinois' defense, when it does dig in, kind of the same answer as Alabama a little bit, but Illinois' defense isn't great. Auburn, you do not want to play Auburn. I know that the App State beat them, but that's not the kind of game Auburn plays nowadays. I think Auburn has I think they're going to get underseeded, and they have a really great chance to make the Final Four. BYU, same thing. I think they've got too much talent for them. And then South Carolina, sure, I don't know. I still have some thoughts about South Carolina. They're the 4th luckiest team in the country, according to KenPom. Something to think about there, especially in a tournament, close game. Yeah, out of those teams, if they draw Alabama, I think they need to be jumping for joy because JMU's offense is more likely to step up than its defense would be to fail, if that makes sense.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. No, I like that way of saying it too. I like that outlook. The next one. So we're going to take a look at what we just talked about a little bit, but we're going to see the net rankings by conference. And hopefully this is showing up for the people that are watching this visually, because I realize now that the graphic, as you see it on a smaller screen, is a little darker than I had intended. So some of them are blending in a little bit more than I had hoped. But where is this paper? Here we go. We have this in chronological order here, going down to see how far down the Sun Belt is, comparing them against some of the top leagues, and why, you're looking at a one bid league in all likelihood. Because I guess Trevor, chime in there real quick. I mean, there's no chance of a two bid for the NCAA tournament, even with as good of a season as App State had, correct?
No, the only chance. So I told you I'd kind of allude to that or come back to that maybe. There's a lot that goes into it. James Madison's chance was 100 times better than App State's. The ideal scenario, all jokes aside, is for App State to beat JMU. Let me make sure I get this right. For App State to beat JMU in the championship in like 4 overtimes. Make it as close as humanly possible. Joe Lenardi makes the 4 overtime joke all the time, and he's a jokester. But the point is net ranking for App 72, net ranking for JMU is 54, which is just below the current cutoff line that they use on bracketologist.com. So, and really honestly, I from what I do understand about this, if they don't have that loss to Southern Miss, so they have 7-1 in quad 3, 22-0 in quad 4, which means they just absolutely did not take a blip in the regular season, realistically. And then 0-1 in quad 2, which I believe was an App State game. Let me make sure I got that right. App State was a quad 2, and then one of those App State games was quad 1, and they're 1-1 in quad 1 because of the Michigan State game. So basically, they don't lose to Southern Miss, they're probably an at-large regardless. Like if they like them losing, they probably do find a way to get in. And then to back up some data on what you mean about historically the Sun Belt isn't actually really a two-bid league. It's only happened, I don't have it in front of me now, I accidentally clicked off the tab, but it's happened basically less than 10 times. And not, I believe, since like 2012, I think was the last one I saw. Okay. So not super recent. And at one point, the Sun Belt got 4 teams in. I don't remember when exactly it was, which is crazy to think. Yeah, I was sitting there filtering through it. I had to like find how to filter through it. But once I figured it out, I was really fascinated by some of the data. So,
well, and to think about like Western Kentucky, who's been there quite a few times in the past, was a former Sun Belt member, among some other teams that I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but possible, the conference was better at basketball at that point in time than the current iteration or somewhat recent iterations. It is interesting. I did go and look the next highest team in the net after App State and JMU. Trevor, you want to take a stab at who that might be?
You talking about from the Sun Belt specifically?
Yeah. Just as a comparison. You don't have to give me the number, just the team maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, I don't want to look at the list of teams in the Sun Belt. I feel like that's a dead giveaway, but maybe not. It's probably Arkansas State, but that's probably not the right answer.
They're probably closer now after what they did in the postseason, but it's Troy at 139, so a huge drop.
Yeah,
once you get past App State and James Madison.
I should have gotten Troy. That was a mistake. Third best team in the conference. That makes sense.
Yeah, so 181 teams would be half of 362. So the vast majority of the Sun Belt teams in the net fall below the halfway point. So that's where you're seeing not a lot of respect and not a lot of chance for a two-bid league. And again, the Sun Belt coming in at 17th. So you've got the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC, the ACC, the Big East, the Pac-12, the Mountain West, Atlantic 10, the American Conference, the Missouri Valley, West Coast League. Look at that logo, by the way. Ugh, that thing is ugly. The Ivy League, which is not much better of a logo probably. And then to round it out, you've got the Southern Conference, where two of the teams currently in the Sun Belt have recently come from, App State and Georgia Southern. They downgraded for basketball as far as that is concerned, which isn't really a big shock, I guess. The Southern Conference has been routinely pretty good. But the Western Athletic Conference, the Conference USA, Big West, and then after all of that, you finally get down to where the Sun Belt falls in net rankings by conference. So yeah, you want to sit there and say, as an App State fan, you think they deserve it, that they've done pretty well. Well, you got to, not only do you have to do better in the net standings, you've got to have more teams in your conference do better in the net standings, right, Trevor? I mean, if you're going up against teams higher in the net throughout the season, then those wins mean more. And if you have some losses, they mean a little less if you're facing opponents that are higher up on that list. So, I mean, that's just a real basic way to look at it. But that's one reason you're not seeing people say, well, App State does deserve it. And it's not that saying they don't deserve it, I guess, but they're just not going to be there, okay? That's just not going to happen. They had too many bad losses at this point. We'll get into them more specifically, I guess, right now. So we've talked about James Madison. Obviously, they will be in the NCAA tournament as we think as a 12 seed and facing one of about 5 or 6 possibilities. And we will see for sure who that is, like you said, Trevor, late Sunday afternoon. But do we have another team that's going to be in postseason play in general? And I would say that I feel pretty confident they'll be in the postseason. We will see if they end up in the NIT or the CBI. And is there even another one that you know of? I can't think. It's just the 3, right? NCAA, NIT, and CBI.
There used to be like collegebasketballinsider.com tournament, which I think, well, I guess that's what the CBI is, right? But
that's right.
But there used to be another tournament at something like it. It's not really recognized. These are the 3.
Gotcha. Okay. So, App State goes 27-6 overall. Pretty good mark when you look at it there. 16-2 in conference. Very impressive mark. Again, even with where the Sun Belt lands, they won the regular season title. They had 2 wins over NCAA-bound James Madison. They had the victory at home that Trevor got to witness in person against Auburn. They had a big-time 86-56 win versus UNCW down in Florida. So that was a neutral site game. But at the time, I actually argued with a few people that win was bigger and more impressive than the win at home over Auburn. Now that quickly dissipated. But when it first happened, those 2 games happened within like a week or 2 of each other. And I thought, UNC may be more impressive than Auburn. And then that switched up. But I had them having 4 bad losses. So one bad loss that they had at the time to start with here was against UNC Asheville in Hickory, North Carolina. At the time of the game, UNC Asheville was only 6-6 on the year. They lost that game 76-63. I can't remember the kid's name, but one of their shooters just shot lights out. What was it?
Oh, Drew Pember is the best player on the team, but the lights out shooter, I cannot remember. Yeah, I was checking the score of that game because I was out and about. I wasn't actually watching it, but yeah, that dude. I mean, I think he 7 of 8 from 3 or something stupid like that, or I think it was more than that. But yeah, ridiculous.
It was crazy. Now, again, at the time of the game, they're 6-6, so it looks like a horrible loss because App State had come in with a much better record at that point.
Yeah, they played Michigan, though. They played UNCW. Michigan. They probably should have beat Michigan, to be fair. They played UNCW and lost. They played Lipscomb and lost, who was a 3 seed in the A-Sun and could have probably won the tournament. Western Kentucky, who's the number 1 seed in the A-Sun, they played and won. Wofford, 35 for the game. Yeah, ridiculous.
30 points in the first half.
At Kennesaw, at Western Carolina. They lost to Auburn. This is at UNC Asheville, by the way. So they all played like relatively similar competition. So 6-6. I mean, at the time, that was probably not a UNC Asheville team that we were like, oh yeah, this is where they get back. Drew Pember, right? My pick ultimately, like UNC Asheville was incredible. I believe I picked them to still finish first anyway, and High Point obviously did what they did, which was unheard of. So anyway,
yeah, they end up finishing second, 22-12 overall. Right. So in the end, not a bad loss. But again, when you're seeing it live, it's a 6-6 loss, or a loss to a team that is only 6-6 on the year. So that didn't look so ugly. Here, there are really ugly ones. Northern Illinois. This was only the second game of the season, so it was hard to tell this at the time. They lost 91-78. They end up 11th in the MAC, only going 11-20 on the season. That very next game for them, for App State, was up in Corvallis against Oregon State, who ended up 12th in the Pac-12 and 13-18 overall. So at the time, that one didn't look like a terrible loss. Like you go all the way across the country, you take a power team to overtime and lose a close one. But now at the end, yikes, not so great when you go and look at it that way. And then They also lost to Texas State, who ends up 17-18 and 10th in the Sun Belt overall. And then, I listed this one because where you were expected to be. Arkansas State played pretty well against them, but I still listed that as a bad loss. You're looking at Arkansas State team who's only 18-16 overall, did finish fourth in the Sun Belt. But again, Sun Belt not being a power conference to speak of, you would think that they could get past that one. They were a perfect 3-0 in quad 1 and 2 games, but they were 5 quad 3 losses and a quad 4 loss. And that is what hurt you. Like you said, if JMU eliminates the Southern Miss loss, where does that put them? Like you said, probably is a not large bid no matter what they did in the conference tournament.
Yeah.
If App State eliminates the quad 4 loss and maybe 1 or 2 of the quad 3 losses, maybe you've got them right there because you still include a win over Auburn and UNCW. And then, you're not dropping so many bad games, but yikes. That's how fine the line is in a one bid league, I guess, Trevor, right? You're going from a possible NCAA to a tournament that a lot less people care about, unfortunately.
Yeah, and look, even like people are going to point at like Indiana State's resume and tell you like, oh, why are they going to potentially make it? I think they had a very similar loss in quad 3 or quad 4. That's what's going to hurt them ultimately. They had bigger wins and they had more quad 1 opportunities that they lost. So they had more times that they went up against these kind of teams. And look, UNCW, like, I can't sit here and tell you that was a bad, that was a great winner. Wasn't like I was picking UNCW from the beginning to win the conference, and then throughout that tournament, before the tournament, et cetera, was at the tournament, watched them loss. Charleston, by the way, at perfect timing on this conversation about CAA by accident on my part. Charleston just clinched against Stony Brook in overtime in with the most combined 3-pointers in CAA championship history. So a shootout that I'm excited to go back and watch. Congrats to Charleston. Just want to put that out there because UNCW was obviously a very popular pick in that league. So sorry, I know I've gone on enough tangents tonight, but yes, 4 bad losses. The 2 that are inexcusable are Northern Illinois. Like, I mean, you can't lose to 298th in the net, Northern Illinois. You just can't. Like, and they were a 3.5 point. The line was fishy. App State was a 3.5 point favorite. At game 2, again, grain of salt there. Was also a Sun Belt challenge, whatever. Maybe there's something there. And then Texas State at the time, probably a bad loss. But really, the more I'm looking at it again, the really only bad losses were to Northern Illinois and Texas State. Like, if we're just being like, now that we know what we know, UNC Asheville, Troy, like, you kind of laid that out already. Oregon State, they should have fired their coach 7 years ago. But so
yeah. So in the end, would you favor them to the NIT, or do you think there's a shot that they don't get taken because of the new rules that they've kind of put into place for this season? Is there a worry at all for App fans to not be going and possibly hosting a game in the NIT, or do you think it's something they might get passed over for?
They're 100% going to get passed over for it probably, and it pisses me off. Like Eastern Kentucky and App State and all these teams, and the argument's going to be, well, just win your conference tournament. And I'm going to tell you to shove it, because at the end of the day, these teams should have an opportunity. The NIT doesn't matter anymore from a national relevancy standpoint. But for these programs, and this is the way that it needs to be looked at, and this shouldn't be an argument from anybody. I'm just talking, the way I'm approaching this conversation for this podcast, because you obviously don't feel this way. I'm approaching it from a 2 a.m. sports radio guy talking to himself, right? Or talking to a caller that's, whatever, working third shift somewhere, right? We've all heard that radio. You know what I mean? Right. Yep. The argument's going to be this, like win your thing, when you're this, when you're that. But what it means to these mid-major programs to play in the NIT, the perfect example is last year. The American had North Texas, who won the NIT, and it had Charlotte, who won the CBI. Look at those two programs now, right? They made the jump up to the American. They were in the Conference USA last year, to be clear. They're in the American now. North Texas, first year without Grant McCaslin. They have an incredible coach in Ross Hodge, who I got to talk to in November at the Charleston Classic, a guy that I will be rooting for, and I think will have North Texas back to the top of their conference, competing very soon. They were a great team this year defensively, didn't drop off there. And then from the Charlotte side of things, Coach Fromm was on that staff last year. Championship experience playing in the CBI. I know it's the CBI and the Tony Patelis jokes on Twitter, but it's the CBI. It's a conference championship that clearly meant something. Coach Fromm was on that staff, and then now Charlotte ended up being, I think, the 3 seed in the American, for crying out loud. Like nobody,
Impressive.
one thought that. He got the interim tag lifted in like January. Like that's an incredible experience, and why the CBI really does matter for these teams. There were some awesome teams in the CBI last year, and ultimately one of the two of those conferences, and even like FAU, right? They were in the Conference USA at the time as well, and they made the Final Four. The Conference USA, a mid-major league, had 3 teams make the Final Four or championship game of all 3 major tournaments. So you're telling me that I'm going to have to watch, instead of App State, who's 27-6, who's probably one of the top 3 or 4 best mid-majors in the country, you're telling me I'm going to have to watch NC State? That's not that team that will be in the NIT. Let me be completely clear. I just threw out the first like middling ACC team I could think of, right?
Yeah.
Pitt. I'm going to watch Pitt. I'm probably giving Pitt less credit than I probably should. But the point is, I'm just giving you these teams. Like I know there's probably better examples out there. These terrible bubble teams that probably shouldn't even be in there at all. So they do. Regular season championship needs to matter for something. It does. I feel so bad for Eastern Kentucky and for App State and for even Indiana State. Indiana State might miss the NIT. That is a travesty to this college basketball country, and it's quite downright ridiculous. I kept it clean.
So elaborate on Neil's thought here. Winning your conference is much more difficult than winning your conference tournament. Do you agree, disagree, or what are your thoughts on that? That's an interesting question.
Here's the argument, right? Stony Brook was just in the conference championship game against Charleston. I just laid that out, right? I've watched that team for 3 days in a row. I'm not sure that that's a team, like they went, whatever they went and they were 7th coming into the tournament, and they went on to do that. It's hard. I think it's harder in a tournament setting because there's more on the line. I think is probably my ultimate argument, right? Stony Brook's playing for its freaking life, and they went to overtime with Charleston. Now, throw the 2 regular season results out the window. Those results meant something at the time, but what does it mean more to a player? A mid-year January conference game against the top seed in the league, or potentially beating them as the number 1 seed versus the 7 seed to go and be the only bid, talking about the no bid or the 1 bid thing, to be the only bid out of the CAA, right? I hate to keep using the CAA on a Sunbelt podcast as my examples, but it's the league I've covered all year, so it's fresh on my mind. Stony Brook, they are a better team in the conference tournament because they were there and they were playing for their life. Yeah, I think it's close to answer his question, but I would argue more for conference championship games or championship tournaments because ultimately those mean more, and players will tell you that, right? I talked to tons of players this weekend. Dean Knoll, for example. I'll just give a shout out to Dean Knoll. He followed me on Twitter. He's an incredible guy playing on a torn meniscus, and that regular season game he probably sits out, or at least maybe takes a day off in the regular season because of that injury or whatever. In that conference tournament, he put a brace on, and his leg couldn't bend past 40 degrees. And he was playing. I figured you probably agreed. I just want to make it clear how passionate the subject really is. But the point is he slapped that knee brace on, and guess what? They won 3 games in a row, and they almost beat Charleston. I didn't make it clear. They almost won in overtime. It was 79-82, I believe, was the final score. So to think that team was dead in the water 3 weeks ago, ultimately the conference means more. Conference tournament means more. Sorry.
I think too, like a great example of that is one we touched on towards the start of the program, Southern Miss, right? They were riddled with injuries before the season started. Like 2 of their players, I think, were out for the year before the first game even took place. So, what if those guys had come back towards midseason or towards even closer to the end of the season? That team is totally different, giving them a chance and ability to make a run that otherwise wouldn't exist. Now, again, I agree with you and Neil that the regular season still does need to mean something. That's what the NIT used to be, right? If you don't make it because you fall apart here or you're a 1 bid league, but you're still a really good team, we have a spot for you. And now it's going to be a money grab, right? I mean, there's a reason they changed the game here, literally, is because they're going to bring in more money by bringing in more programs that bring more eyes and people to stadiums, which, I mean, great for their pockets, not good for the product on the court. Like you said, you're going to have middling power programs just because they're a bigger brand name and they're bringing in more money and viewers, but your product on the court is not going to be as good. I mean, you're going to randomly have some good games here and there, but is your champion really going to be as good as it could have been when you don't invite some of the better teams that didn't make the NCAA tournament?
Well, the ultimate thing is, talking about the good thing, it's ultimately going to be a team that people are, A, going to recognize more. That was the whole point of it. And then B, the thought is potentially a more talented team. But I'm telling you, I would take that North Texas team last year over 15 to 25 Power 6 conference teams. To give you a better realistic answer, who'd you rather see right now in the let's say the NIT for the sake of the problem that shouldn't have been passed? Virginia Tech, or Syracuse, or App State? Like one of those two or App State. I don't care what people think nationally. I'm sorry. I've seen both teams play this year. I would rather see the 27-6 team that is more talented.
Yeah.
Which would. Sorry.
Yeah. I think people that don't like App State kind of want to see App State. I mean, like, you want to see where they really stand, even if you don't want them to win. Like, you still want to, like, if you're a Sunbelt person, you're probably still interested on how good were they? You know, we played them.
Right.
You know, we either didn't think they were as good as that people thought, or they were really good, right? I mean, it probably depends on whether you won or lost that game. But I mean, I want to see that. There was one other thing. Like, if you look back at the standings, Troy finishes with a 20-12 overall record, 13-5. Their net's not great, but I mean, maybe possibly CBI invitation if, you know.
They're 100% in the CBI. I'd be shocked if they didn't. And there are teams, for what it's worth, that have already been invited to the CBI.
Yes, I meant to try and pull some of those up, to be honest with you, and I didn't. Is anybody in the NIT yet, or did they wait until?
No, they wait.
Okay, that's what I thought. So I did not know CBI was already throwing out invitations, but I was going to try and look some of that up. Neil's got another question here. Would you be afraid to play Virginia, Princeton, or Norfolk State? And as he has asked that, and you start to answer, I'm going to throw it over to just, you're going to have your general thoughts, ideas, whatever you want to share on your bracket. Again, not a bracketologist, but I know you got some teams you've liked throughout the season and some teams you've got to watch or really think could go on a Cinderella type run. So after you go through this with Neil's question, go ahead and just jump into what you think people should look out for across the board or specifically with one or two teams.
So I'm really confused by the question because it's Virginia, ACC power, probably a 7 seed or 8 seed. Princeton, who's more than likely, knock on wood, going to win the Ivy for my liking and for everyone else's liking. They need to be in the tournament. And then Norfolk State. They're really good in the MEAC. They're probably going to be the MEAC champion as well. But those are 3 drastically different levels of teams. So I'm only just slightly confused by the question, so I'll just answer it the way it's been posed. I would only be afraid out of those to play Princeton. I just don't know who the reason because of what I think about Princeton, but the reason I'm really confused by the question is it's who is it afraid? Is it JMU? Because the only team that they have a chance of playing out of those is probably Princeton if they make it to the Sweet 16. Like, it would be really hard for those two to go up. So I don't really know if that's JMU directed. But if I'm blank team and I play one of these 3 somehow, I'm the most afraid of Princeton, actually. So I hope that answers his question. He can follow up if he'd like. But
yeah, I would agree. Just on my base knowledge, the only thing is, Virginia does play that, suffocating D, but they're kind of like Iowa in football. They just struggle to score points.
Virginia Tech scored 90 points on them earlier this year.
Wow.
So I know they can shoot threes, but like Virginia's beatable. Virginia, this is not the year people are going to look at Virginia and be like, well, the defense, people are going to circle them into the Sweet 16 or even like just at least the round of 32. And I'm not sure, depending on the matchup. Can play any of these. That's a really good. That's unbelievable clarity.
Yeah.
And by the way, my answer stays the same. So
yeah, that's true.
That's really great, Cody. Thank you we were on app, so that's probably I probably should have figured that out. But
yeah. To be clear, I should tell you, Neil's an App State guy, so
I figured so. I could kind of tell.
Yeah, you could figure it out. I want some redemption against Norfolk State, if I can be honest. Not in the sexiest matchup, I guess, but just one that I think I don't know how much of that game you saw a couple years ago, but they just got completely decimated in the first half. Woke up in the second half, come all the way back from like almost 20 points down in the first half, take the lead late, and then of course it was just like that Arkansas State finish essentially. Took the lead late. Had a chance to make it a little bigger or let them close the gap. They close the gap, and then they win right there at the tail end of that one. So, unfortunate, but I would like another shot for that reason myself. Point I'm making is these teams are in, and I see, yeah.
Well, 2 of them will be automatic qualifiers if they have a chance, so it really won't,
True.
It'll be if they lose or not. Not that we really care at this point now, but since we've been talking about it, but some teams that have already been invited that I found, you see San Diego, who's ineligible for the NCAA tournament if they were to win that conference. Doesn't matter. They're in the CBI, which is really awesome because I believe that makes them ineligible for the NIT because technically it's the college basketball insiders thing. So it's not NCAA official. Like it's not deemed to the rule. And I think that is it. I think they actually literally might be the only one.
And why is that? What are they suspended under something or?
No, like that's they're ineligible. No, sorry, ineligible because they just came up for the 4-year rule, the transition.
I got you.
Yeah. Okay. Like Queens is another example. They probably go to CBI. Well, they won't because of record, but they are another example of a team that's in transition as well.
Bellarmine too, isn't that one you mentioned?
Bellarmine had a tough year this year. They finished in the bottom of the A-Sun. Love Coach Scotty Davenport. Talked to him many times. Great dude, but tough year. They battled injuries. They, I think 6 of their 13 most roster or 13 like highest minutes players, 6 of them had season-ending injuries, if I remember correctly.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so they had a rough year.
Where is that school? I don't know off the top of my head.
So that's a really loaded question. It's in Louisville. So they play Louisville every year. That was the team that beat Louisville 2 years ago. That incredible offense that for like 4 straight minutes the ball didn't touch the ground because of passing. That was that team, and they play at Freedom Hall, which is Kentucky or Louisville's old arena in Louisville. So really cool venue. Yeah,
very very nice. Neil just says I'm still just pissed we lost. Yeah, it was to me. It was
for
the
you.
way we lost.
I am I'm here as an unbiased party. I know that you're an App State guy, but I wanted them to be in the tournament. They were my pick because I wanted to see a chance that JMU really did have a chance to make it. So
yeah. He said we'd be a good draw here in the South. Charlotte, Greenville said, yeah. I mean, if they ended up in Charlotte, I'd have been doing whatever I could to get there. But also those tickets, you're talking about conference tournament, NCAA tickets are crazy.
Yeah,
for a
you
second.
gotta get them early. Gotta get them really early, from what I understand.
Yeah. Are you headed to any games this year? Are you going to any regional action?
No, I tweeted it yesterday. I sent my official thank you to in-person game stuff. I tagged a bunch of people that were really helpful this year. I went to 40 games, 36 college basketball, and 4 high school, like I said earlier. And unless something changes, the only chance that I'll just make it abundantly clear publicly, the only chance I go to a game of any kind that is in person the rest of this season is if NC State women make the Final Four, I will be flying my mother to Cleveland because I've always told her if they ever make a game like that in our lifetime, as in my lifetime, then I will find a way for us to make it there. I don't care how much it costs. Nice. And they obviously have a great chance. They're second best team in the ACC. So Virginia Tech's incredible. Iowa, obviously. There's a lot of other teams that are going to prevent them from getting there, but they draw a good bracket, and some cardiac pack stuff starts to happen. Could be seeing myself in Cleveland in the first week of April.
Interesting. I've been to Cleveland. I actually kind of like that city. I know some people, I've heard things that, people don't like it or it's not great, but I thought it was a very cool city to hang out in for a couple of days. Getting back into maybe some thoughts on the bracket. So I want to start with the first Cinderella. I think they might have been one of the first teams in. So Stetson makes their first ever NCAA tournament. I don't know how much you know about them. I know next to nothing. They're the A-Sun representative, but is there anything or is it they've got any kind of shot to win their first game against who knows who yet?
You had no idea this, but literally 2 hours ago, I got done interviewing their head coach for a podcast. So shout out to Coach Donnie Jones and Stetson for coming out of the A-Sun. Literally just got done talking to him. So yes, Stetson is very fresh on my mind. Justin Blackman's an incredible player. He had 43 in the championship game of the A-Sun. Obviously, that game came down into the 90s. No single team in the A-Sun plays defense. So Stetson's hope is to not draw a 16. We obviously know that 16 can beat a 1, but I'm telling you, this is probably not the year. This is going to age horribly if that happens, and don't clip this. But this is probably, even what I think about Purdue, this is probably not the year. At the end of the day, Stetson, unless they draw a 15, I love Coach Donnie Jones, but good grief, they're not. The A-Sun gets the worst draw possible every year. I mean, they don't ever get a reasonable, hey, could they probably beat a team? They probably actually are probably going to get the first 4, which is really sad. But they're an incredible team, incredible story. The A-Sun was an awesome team, awesome group this year. Really would have loved it for Lipscomb as well. Know Coach Lenny Acuff pretty well. But Stetson, shout out to Stetson. I don't really have a ton. They've got a super good guard rotation, which is the cliche thing to tell you in March, but they actually do have that. Look out for their freshmen. You know what's crazy enough? I just had them pulled up talking to him, and I don't have it pulled up now. But they had a freshman that he keyed in on. I asked him, hey, who's somebody that the national public, when they look at the thing, they're going to see Blackman, obviously, and they're going to say Jalen Blackman. Sorry, I said Justin Blackman earlier. I'm pretty sure that was a wide receiver for Oklahoma State. So shout out to the Blackman last name. I got me all mixed up.
Hey, points for knowing Blackman. That, though. Points for knowing the name recognition.
I was really big into the draft in the NFL back then. I don't know why. So Jalen Blackman, Stephon Swinson, who hit a really big buzzer beater for them to even get to the title game in the A-Sun. Look out for Tristan Gross, their freshman 6'6". They're playing him at power forward because they had a guy that go out with an ACL injury, and yet they still won the conference tournament. And so shout out to Stetson. That was probably longer than you expected me to talk about Stetson, but
no, that's great. No, that's awesome. I did not know that tidbit, so that's really cool that you got to talk with him before that. So it looks like, wait, who did you say punched their ticket again tonight?
Charleston. Yeah, that's a team I can't sit here and tell you that they don't have a great chance, just like they did last year. They just got incredibly unlucky last year. All of the obvious pretty picks are going to be, just to answer your question that I think you were getting at there, was all the obvious pretty picks. Everyone's going to pick Grand Canyon if they make it out of the WAC. Everyone's going to pick JMU. Like, let me just make that abundantly clear. They're going to be the most picked 12, 13, 14 seed in the tournament. It's not even a question. They're a 30-win team, just like Charleston was last year. 30-win team, the whole thing. Right now, I leaned Grand Canyon for 2.5 months. I cannot sit here and tell you with a conscience that Charleston isn't a team that can make the Sweet 16. They are. They're 1,000% that. That Stony Brook loss was desperation on Stony Brook's part, like we've already established. And Charleston's incredible. They can win any game in any way they want. They can score 90. They can score 60 like they've done in this tournament. They can score an incredible amount of three-pointers. Rain Smith's an unbelievable player. His impact is felt even more when even he doesn't shoot well. He was 3 of 10 the other night, and he was like plus 29, plus minus. That just gives you an idea how good the team is. Incredibly deep. Coach Pat Kelsey, I've made it very clear, is one of the best coaches in the country, who will probably not be at Charleston long either. But I don't want to say that too loudly. But I got the chance to interview him this weekend, obviously, in D.C. Incredible coach, incredible guy. Want to root for them. Charleston's probably my pick if I had to answer your Cinderella question with one name and not 55 names that I probably feel strongly about.
Nice. One I recognize that just made it. You touched on Morehead State earlier. Drake's in there, which they've always, every couple of years they seem to go on a run. I guess they were just in the last
year. By the way, that's the other pretty pick. By the way, people are going to see, people are already picking them as a Sweet 16 team, and we don't even know a bracket yet. And they drew Miami last year, who made the Final Four. And again, that game was less than 10. People don't realize that.
Yeah, good one. So, any thoughts on a former SoCon opponent for Georgia Southern and App State in Sanford, down there in little private school in Alabama?
Buckyball. Buckyball's incredible. I mean, they're 29 wins. They could win 30 if they beat somebody in March Madness. Not exactly sure where their seed is right this second. It's probably not going to be good because the SoCon doesn't get treated very well. They are, at 13. Wow. Okay. Somewhere around the McNeese State's can also be. There's so many mid-majors this year that people are picking that are incredible. McNeese is also in there as well. Samford is the one you just asked about. Achor is one of the best players in the country at his size and positional strength. Like, he can bully ball you down low. He can also shoot the three incredibly well. That's a guy that if you don't have a game plan for Achor, you're losing to them in March Madness. Like, if you don't have a game plan, you come out and execute it, that's somebody that can absolutely take somebody down. I know they played Purdue earlier in the year. They do challenge themselves. I know they played Purdue. The only reason I can remember that verbatim is because they did the jump ball. They did a video where they had their shortest guy. He was 5'2" or something stupid like that. And they had him jump the ball against Zach Edey or something like that. I just remember the promo video for it. It was really funny. They lost that game to Purdue 98-45 in the first game of the year. So tough. But no, at the end of the day, Samford's a great team. They played Purdue, VCU. They played as well. They played Louisiana, Belmont. These are all teams that I think were good, even if they didn't make the tournament. And then they played, obviously, their conference schedule. So I think that they are an incredible offense. They don't miss. They're 56.9% effective field goal percentage, which is ninth in the country. Now, if they miss, You got a game on your hand because they lost to Furman this year, who took advantage of that. Mercer, who was really bad in the SoCon, and they took advantage of it, 88-84.
Wow!
But they don't. They averaged an incredible amount of points, so you're just not going to beat them if you don't score with them.
Interesting. Well, so we covered some Cinderellas. Is there any big time usual suspects that you just know for your heart of heart, you know they're going to be there in the end type of thing? Since we've covered the one side, let's go with the power programs and the guys you expect to be there and the favorites to be in the Final Four, as we see most years.
It's so hard to answer this question, and I'll tell you why. Because there are two that I think. So the problem is UConn's going to win the national championship. Let me just go ahead and put that out there for a second.
Oh, okay.
UConn's going back to back, and there is enough data historically, and there is enough of an eye test this year where they basically haven't been challenged this year. Like, they just haven't. Even those games early in the year, they won them. Like, they had, I think, the one loss to like North Carolina or something, right? They had the one in the really early on in November, but still impressive win for, again, whoever that was. Let me just pull it up so I'm not talking out of my tail.
I think it was North Carolina because I actually,
Kansas.
weirdly enough, I have a UConn fan.
Kansas 69-65, but that game against North Carolina, to be clear, was 87-76, also really close as well. So, both those games back-to-back, by the way. They played Gonzaga as well. So, their only loss, Seton Hall and Creighton. At Creighton, at Seton Hall. At Kansas. That's it. This are three teams that have beaten them this year by less than 10.
That's
Sorry,
crazy.
Finish your UConn story. I interrupted.
Oh no, I was just saying I'm literally across from one another as a UNC and a UConn fan. And what's funny enough is the UConn fan obviously took UConn to win it last year, won my bracket challenge, and I took UConn to win, and he ended up edging me by like a point or two. Took the cake there.
All right. I think I got you back. I think I lost you for a second there.
Yeah.
You're good. I heard the most of it at the end there. So, I just want to preface with that UConn is more than likely going to win the national championship. Let's just make that abundantly clear. So to answer your question beyond now that that's established, because I'm not the only one that thinks that, millions of people think that. My pick that has been really unpopular for most of the year, I think Houston has as good a chance to beat anybody in the March Madness tournament. People are going to tell you about the offense. They're going to tell you about missing Terrence Arsenault for the season. They also just lost somebody as well to a foot injury. They're number one in the country in Javier Francis. No, they lost Joseph Tugler, unfortunately, to an injury. But look, is stuff piling up for them a little bit right now? Sure. But did they also just go from the American Conference to the Big 12 and then literally not drop off at all and won the Big 12 for crying out loud? Like, let's be real with each other for a second.
Yeah.
They went from the American, who, not knocking the American, but they were the perennial powerhouse in the American. In year one, Coach Sampson gets them to the Big 12 and wins the Big 12 regular season championship. That's ridiculous. Like, the Big 12 is going to have 9 tournament teams. Every single night was a tooth and nail fist fight battle. Best defense in the country. I saw them play 3 times in person this year. Got to talk to Coach Sampson a couple of times after those games. I'm telling you, Houston, again, people are going to clip this. This is going to age poorly if they lose in the Sweet 16 again or something stupid like that. But this is a team that has been through enough. They're experienced. Jamal Shedd's been in that program for many, many years. He's one of the best guards, if not the best guard in the country. Obviously, there are plenty of guys up there in that conversation. LJ Cryer has made an unbelievable impact on this team. The front court is a lot deeper than I think people give it credit for. Obviously, the injuries don't help that. So without going way far into my Houston problem, they are 68.7% from the free throw line, which is 301st in the country. So close game, kind of thing. Tough. Problem is they don't play close games that often. Like I was literally driving back from the CAA championship, and there was some guy on the radio talking about Houston, and the way he was talking about him, it sounded like they were in the American in his head. And people were like, he's like, can they score 80 or can they score this or whatever? Literally 3 games ago, they played Oklahoma and they won 87-85. Oklahoma, who, by the way, 40th in KenPom, really good season this year in the tournament. So they're able. The problem is teams don't score 80 on them. They just don't. They strangle you, right? They absolutely put you in a stranglehold. They're the number one defense. By the way, as of right now, they will finish as the number one defense ever, according to KenPom. Again, 99. Keep that in mind. There probably were some better defenses we didn't know enough data about. But Houston will finish as the best defense ever. And then offense, they're 11th. So tell me enough about the offense. I can tell you it's Kim Pom. I can tell you there's some things against it, whatever. But they're still one of the best teams in the country that I think not enough people are going to be picking. And then to kind of answer your question and not give you literally the two best teams according to Kim Pom right this second, Tennessee. I think this is Tennessee's year to at least get to the Final Four. Dalton Connect, to be a transfer from a school of that size, I mean, like, I don't have the exact team in front of me, shame on me, but people have said it a million times. They know where he transferred from. But to be a transfer 4 years, Northern Colorado, got it, bingo. To be a transfer from Northern Colorado and to be arguably the second best player in the entire country. If I had a vote right now, I want to be abundantly clear, I would vote for Dalton Connect for Player of the Year. I would.
Wow.
National Player of the Year. I would vote for him for National Player of the Year. Zach Edey won it last year. Dalton Connect's jump up and just what he's done offensively and even defensively in some metrics is absolutely unheard of, and he deserves every bit of the praise. The defense is legit. They're third in defense. They're 25th in offense. I think this is the year they're battle tested. They're, obviously they split the season series with Kentucky, so they've played those really tough games, and they looked incredible early in the year as well in Maui. So I have no reason to tell you that Tennessee can't be in the Final Four. The problem is I only think there are two teams that can actually win the national championship, and I've already talked about them. So to answer your question, I've been talking for way too long. It's probably Houston, Connecticut, Tennessee in that order for me right this second. So
there's no chance, because one of the brackets I brought up has Tennessee going up against Stenson in the first round. No chance.
No, because Dalton Connect exists unless he gets like COVID the day before. Like there's just like Coach Kelsey and for Towson the other day was like, someone asked like, hey, I know Charleston's tomorrow and you probably got to recap this game and actually like break it down, whatever. I'm only saying this because of what he said was funny. They were like, any keys to like potentially beating Charleston? He's like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they have the wrong time for the game. Maybe Berzovic gets COVID. Maybe Rain Smith starts shooting with his right hand instead of his left hand. Like he just started laying out the most ridiculous. And this is Pat Skerritt we're talking about from Towson. But anyway, but the point is that's basically what would have to happen for someone like Stetson. Again, no disrespect to Donnie Jones. I love him to death. But it's not even a Stetson thing. It's a Tennessee probably beats the first round opponent by 40. Like it's that they probably hold them 250 and they score 90. Like it's probably what's going to happen. It's definitely going to be the 9 or 10 o'clock tip that ends up being later than it should be. Right. Like, the one that always just leans into like the next hour that it shouldn't. And you're watching it's like 10:22 Eastern or something stupid like that. It's the one that you're going to be like, I could use some extra sleep even if it's March. And you probably go to bed without any worry there. So
yeah. Okay. That makes sense. They also got that Ziegler kid over there too, for Tennessee, who's on the smaller side, but really, really good defensively, huh?
Brother playing at St. Peter's as well. Yeah, he's an incredible guy coming off an ACL injury, lateral quickness. But he was the best player on the floor in the Kentucky game. So that team is obviously, I'm not giving enough of them credit, but Dalton, they go as far as Dalton Connect will take them. You didn't ask this, but I think the way you were alluding to the Stetson thing, this may be something that would at least give you maybe what you're looking for a little bit. If there was a team, and I'll just stick with the top 10 in KenPom, I'll say top 8. Let me eliminate Creighton, Illinois. All teams that are realistic 1 seeds except for Auburn. So Houston, Connecticut, Purdue. Auburn's not a 1 seed. They're just not. Tennessee, Arizona, Duke, North Carolina. Those are all realistic 1 seeds, maybe even Duke, right? So just North Carolina, Tennessee, Purdue, Connecticut, and Houston, and Arizona. The team that could lose if there was a 116, it would be Arizona.
Oh, yeah, really?
100%. It would be Arizona. It would be a 2 for 18 Caleb Love kind of game. It would be a team that has a really strong front court to go up against Omar Ballo. Colin Boswell can get you, can shoot you into shoot you in the foot in some spots if you're not careful. But when he's controlling the pace of the game, they control the game really well. So, they have really great players. They're a really talented team. They beat Duke really early on in the year. Obviously, we know that. But Arizona, of all those teams, they are, I think, the weakest.
Gotcha. Makes sense. But I guess I wasn't thinking about that. But yeah, I like it. I like what you gave for a matchup there and a possibility. That's what the people came to watch. Somebody who knows what they're talking about and can predict these types of things to possibly happen. I know you didn't put any kind of stamp of guarantee on it, but possible things. Give the Duke fans that are still watching the celebratory one that you showed me earlier.
The JMU fans, right? Yeah. Is this the I don't know if it's going to do it because my thumbs are not registering. I don't know. For YouTube, the people on YouTube are going to love this. People on audio are going to be really confused.
Yeah, that's true. They're like, what are they talking about? Anyway,
there we go. Congrats to the JMU Dukes. There we go. The fireworks going off in the background. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, very cool. He was showing me that before we got rolling, so we definitely wanted to get that in on the visual aspect. And you're right, the people that are listening are like, "What's going on in the background that I can't see?" But yeah, definitely some cool graphics and effects. You said it's a Mac that does that?
Yeah, apparently it's an Apple thing. I found out like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I have a MacBook Pro, and it's been awesome. But it does random stupid things on podcasts, like put fireworks and stuff all over the screen. Don't know. Talk about it. What can I tell you?
If you guys win your brackets and you're looking for something to spend your money on, and you do this podcast thing or video with conference calls for work, then you've got a really cool thing that you can have in your backgrounds. So anyway. Trevor is a plethora of information. Like I said, not only is he very knowledgeable on college basketball, he's also covering the pros. He's putting out podcasts all the time. He's got a YouTube channel. So Trevor, tell the fine people where they can find you and follow along, especially as you go through, and I'm sure continue to share lots of thoughts as we get closer and closer to all the bracket reveal that will happen on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy every bit of free time is probably not the right word, but I'll enjoy every bit of time I have left because my wife's going to hate me come Sunday at 6 p.m. from then until God knows when. Funny enough, our anniversary is Monday, so we took the trip a little early, so I just want to give her a shout out because, it was hard to convince her to go watch a 6-win Coastal Carolina team, even if JMU was the opponent. It was really hard sell there. Hey, I know we're doing our anniversary trip 3 weeks early because of March Madness, but JMU's there, and it is funny. I didn't even think about the fact that they made it. It was like, oh my God, wait, I had a chance to see the eventual tournament team. It's tough. I really thought it was going to be App State, which is why I wasn't too mad about it. I was like, you know what? I picked App State all year, like I've told you earlier in the year. So I was like, you know what? I don't need to see JMU because I don't think they're going to make it. Shame on me. All right. So we're already here long enough, I'm sure. So first of all, thank you. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I'll be working on a lot of stuff the next couple of weeks. It's aged poorly now, but I did a CAA recap. If anyone wants to read the work there, some quotes from coaches I felt like aged pretty well, regardless of the tenure there of their team and how far they made it. My last recap was on Sunday. Also, just House of College Hoops, all the stuff that we have going on over there as a collective, kind of like college football dogs a little bit there in a sense. We cover college basketball in that vein. We've got a guy that was at the championship tonight, so I'm sure he'll have a great recap up there. Zach Penrice, give a shout out to him. House of College Hoops, wherever people want to go find that. And then myself, obviously, like you have in the title, 2 Pointers Podcast. Well, it's on the screen as well. The 2 Pointers Podcast. I've been doing that for about 3 years. I don't know when it's going to go out. I don't know how it's going to go out, but we're going to figure it out. I'm really glad we did this the week before. I appreciate that. I would love to have talked about the actual matchup that they have, the MU, but again, it's all hypothetical right now, and it just would have been impossible. So look for content from me on Selection Sunday. ECB podcast will be at 5 o'clock. We'll have some coaches on. We'll have some players. We'll have a string of interview series of coaches and players that have already locked up their tournament bid, like Donnie Jones and the Stetson Hatters. You can see those interviews on the ECB podcast, Facebook group, YouTube channel, all that stuff as well. And then my show, I pray to God that I might get my show out by Tuesday night because basically on Wednesday, people were sick of trying to preview stuff and do their brackets, and they're just like filling them out brain numbingly on Wednesday and Thursday. So it's really, I hope to have it out by Tuesday. So whenever it's out, like, follow, subscribe, all that stuff's greatly appreciated.
Very nice. Yeah, absolutely. We've got one last comment from Neil, who's staying with us all the way to the end of the show. Good show, guys. I'm still pissed. Don't like JMU, but congrats to them. And then he has this really ugly, terrible saying at the end here that he says, "Go Heels." Oh my gosh. I got to take that off the screen as soon as I say it. It almost got sick in my mouth there. I can't stand that school at all.
You're a Duke guy, right? To be completely clear to me, I want to make sure. You don't care.
I'm not like a Duke guy. I wouldn't say that. Okay. I'm a Carolina hater. So because Duke is so evidently against them, feverishly against them, I just pull for Duke over Carolina. But I don't really like Duke. App State's my team, so
it's hard to hate Carolina, at least for on Saturday after what Kyle Tripakowski did. So
the next Grayson Allen, right?
Yeah, I still can't. There are people out there defending that, and I just can't for the life of me understand it. So
You know, I don't know either. But Neil says he's an app guy. Well, I know you're an app guy, but
I'm an honorary app guy. Thank you. I am an honorary app guy for what it's worth. Honorary.
There you go. But yeah, Trevor, thank you very much. Like you said, you appreciate being on the show. I appreciate you making the time for us because you brought all kinds of information and again, expertise. You might not be a bracketologist, but you could probably fake that you are, honestly, with how much knowledge you have. So we really appreciate you coming on the show. This won't be the last time, folks. Trevor and I talked throughout much of the season about specifically Sunbelt basketball, but even some other things. And so Trevor will be back on again in the future. And stay tuned. He's going to have a lot more coverage for March Madness. And maybe he'll say some stuff about some NIT and some CBI if we get App State and Troy in those tournaments as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. Check it out wherever you stream podcasts, and we'll see you guys around next time.